Hey there, everyone out there in YouTube. I tried to go live earlier, but I was having some serious problems with my quality for some reason. Anyway, Happy New Year. I'm going to just adjust my screen here. I'm not like an editing YouTube person or anything. Happy New Year, and I felt like doing another tinnitus update today. So I just got back from my big walk and sometimes I feel like doing a tinnitus update. So, the holidays can be hard, I guess, for tinnitus people. I'm just coming out of the holidays. Uh, I go back to work on Monday. Uh, I can find the holidays can be kind of tough because a lot of the time I'm at home relaxing, and that can be the hardest part about having tinnitus for me now. Is that I can kind of it's gotten kind of in the way when I'm trying to do things I like to do. Oh, but what I've really worked on this holiday season is doing my meditation to my tinnitus. So I have ongoing on and off anxiety about it. So when I was away working in Victoria for like 2 weeks, it was really bad the day I went down there. It was really snowy and really bad driving, and I like drove down to Victoria 3.5 hour. Took 5 hours to get there in the snow, towing a trailer. And when I got there, it just seemed off the charts loud, eh? And I definitely made some sort of connection between like stress or like fight or flight or driving, any kind of like thing like that activity, and then the droning of the diesel motor of the truck. It kind of like triggered it a bit. Anyway, I did a couple weeks in Victoria, and I've really found that like the one Airbnb I stayed in was really quiet, and I was just like sitting in there watching a little TV, like really listening to my tinnitus and doing the work, which is like really working at noticing my reaction to it and trying to minimize my reaction to it. So I did a bit of work on that, and then when I got home and I was with my family again, and we were like having a little bonfire, and we had the dog, and I was like, this is off the charts. And all of a sudden I was like backwards. I was like back in this tinnitus anxiety thing for like a day. And then I got like a couple good sleeps. My back was really sore. I took like a week off. I barely even like left the couch. I was pretty hurting. I was just watching TV with my dog. And I started to kind of readapt to the tinnitus. And then I thought I'd experiment a little bit, and I actually microdosed a tiny little bit. I think my partner, she got a microdose kit or something. It was a tiny little microdose, and I took it, and it really ramped up my tinnitus that night. It really ramped it up, and I felt like I went completely backwards with my work on it. And but you know what? The next couple of days after, and then I went into my room and I meditated, and then over the next couple of days it kind of simmered down, and then I really kind of noticed that I was kind of getting back into that thing where I'm like, okay, I'll try this, I'll try that, I'll try microdosing, I'll try this, I'll try that. And I kind of was like, no, I really need to focus on the meditation. So the next few nights I made it like totally quiet in my bedroom, and I like really worked at meditating to the tinnitus, and I kind of regained a little bit of strength and like was able to start getting through my days. And I really did notice this thing that I've been told 2.5 years ago, where they said the more that you habituate to tinnitus, the less loud it'll seem. And but then when you really think about it, it's not less loud. So I've been experiencing that a little bit, and it helps me build up a little bit more callous towards it, where I can actually tell myself, especially the type of guy that I am. Like, I'm a carpenter. I see something, I learn from it, I build on it. If I built a foundation that has a radius wall in it, I know that if I build a playground later that has a radius in it, I can use the same technique. So I build on that. I also, as a carpenter, have quite a bit of other strengths, and in a lot of ways I'm like kind of like intolerant to like people being unable to do things or figure things out. So I kind of see it like that, where like I keep building myself up, and my buddies do too, and they're like, you're tough, you're hard, you got this, there's worse things, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, I'm tough. And you almost have to get like that, like I'm stronger than the people who think they can't habituate. I'm stronger than people who let tinnitus control their life and make them want to kill themselves. And I'm stronger than trying to find the cure, because here's the thing. The top German neurologist in Europe there, he can't even figure out tinnitus. So if he can't figure out tinnitus, I definitely can't figure out tinnitus. So I kind of like, over the time I've had it, I've kind of been like, okay, I'm not going to figure out what it is, how it happened, if it gets worse, if it gets better, any of that. I'm not going to be able to figure that out, because not even people with like a master's degree in like neuroscience can do that. And I'm definitely smart, but not like that kind of smart. I'm like smart, like hit the nail in the right place kind of smart, or like be a good driver of my truck kind of smart, or like figure out math for a roof kind of smart. But I don't know what's going on inside of me, really. It's the basics. So I kind of used that thing where I'm like, okay, I've had a few good days before now. I've had a couple of days where I'm like feeling normal. Like I have music on. I'm not saying I'm not hearing the tinnitus. I'm just like enjoying my music, or I'm like playing a little guitar, or I'm like at work. Work seems to really, I like work. So, and that's something else I wanted to talk about, is that when this first happened, I thought I would never work again. The sound of the hammer with my hyperacoustics hitting, even with earplugs on, it just seemed so loud. The dog barking next door in the house was triggering me. I like freaked out. I was like freaking out because a dog was barking in the neighbor's house. That's how sensitive my hearing got. You know, I couldn't even use a vacuum cleaner or anything like that. But now, and then I slowly kind of got back into work. My hearing therapist I had in Vancouver there, she said do 4 hours a day of carpenter work. And I went for a whole 6 months. And then I did 6 for a while. And then in the new year last year, I went back to 8, 10. I even did 14 12-hour days in a row up in Kitimat. I went to camp even. I went on a plane. So I really pushed myself to like do the shit that I used to do. And then certain things that I used to do in the workplace, like run a jackhammer all day long. I don't necessarily always do that, but I still work near the compressed air. I did all the things I used to do that freaked me out when I got tinnitus, thinking that would make it worse. So that's really helped me. And then I had a buddy bring me into a playground building business, and I started building playgrounds in October, and I went out on my own. And it's been like quite a big change. Good money, but I like, upgraded my work tools and my pickup truck, and I went through like all the regular stuff that like regular people go through. And in my tinnitus journey, one of the things that you're supposed to look for is, you're not necessarily like looking for you to necessarily not hear tinnitus or feel good or be 100% like your old self or happy or whatever. That's not necessarily what they're looking like, happy all the time. Like, it's harder. I find it definitely harder to keep a stable mood all day with tinnitus. At this point in it for me, I do dip dive all the time, and I have definitely struggled with depression and stuff like that, and ruminate on it and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is that getting back into working for me and having like some debt to push with my business and my new payment on my truck, and getting out there and doing complicated playground builds and getting my mind into that has really helped me. And when I'm out working, even though I miss my wife and I miss my dog, and I'm like away in Vancouver, Victoria, near where I live, or way up north, I still feel like I'm busy. I'm using my hands. I'm using my brain. I'm focusing on doing this build. I'm really interested in it. And I will have like a good chunk of my day where I'm not sitting there just like, oh my God, this tinnitus, and whatever each of our personal thoughts are on it. For people who suffer from tinnitus, I would say that your thoughts can go from it's not too bad, it's kind of quiet, to oh my god, this is horrifying, I can hear it above moving traffic, to I can hear I'm at a concert or something, that's still all I can hear. Or for some people it could almost be like they want to end their life, or it could be like a little bit less intense, like it can be more of a like anxiety thing. For me, since I'm a musician, I find that I always tended to like enjoy listening to sounds in my environment, and I like listening to the birds, or I used to like love sitting out in my yard and like listening to the semi trucks roll by on the highway, kind of not near my house, but just in the or yonder. You could kind of hear the woo, 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 woo of the trees, and you could hear the different crickets and stuff like that. And when I was a little younger, I just loved to sit out there and like smoke a joint, like listen to all the sounds around me and bathe in the soundscape of like the evening. On the flip side, I would also get super triggered by like screaming children or barking dogs, and I had some element of misophonia going on for a few years there, and I'd have this different emotional reaction to sounds. So I have tried. Yeah, I'll go outside now and sit out there with my dog and like have a smoke or whatever, and I'll be like hearing the same sounds. Like I can still hear pretty good, so I'll hear like a semi truck going by. Hear those and all those sounds that I like to listen to, but I'll also hear the psss or whatever it is that I hear, because sometimes it's a little bit changing, right? So, sometimes it's like barely even there, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm outside listening to the rain. I can barely hear the tinnitus, and like almost as soon as I think of, I can barely hear the tinnitus, it's like my brain heard my thoughts, and it's just like, oh yeah, let me turn that up for you. You must make sure that you can hear this like over the rain, and I'm like, oh god, and then I'll be like, I'll have a reaction, and I'll go inside and I'll find a more soundproof environment, and I'll be sitting there listening to my tinnitus. But I'll notice myself doing old things that I used to do that I kind of stopped doing. Like today, I was going for a walk in the forest, and that's another thing that's helped me lately. Is I just go for lots of 2-hour 10K dog walks on my holidays with my dog off leash or whatever. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know I did get a dog, like a therapy type dog, when I first was getting bad tinnitus. After about 6 months, I got a dog, and it's been almost 2 years. And having that dog is like the best thing that ever happened to me. I can go away now and work and not have the dog, but just knowing that I have the dog home with my family, and I can come home and the dog's going to be there, it really makes me happy. And then when I'm home, I get up in the morning, I do my 10K or my 7K with the dog, and then I like whatever the weather is, and then I come home, and then I'll like play with my Far Cry. Like you guys might have watched that I stream video games again. There was a time in my life where I thought I would never play games that I could shoot in again. I could barely enjoy playing video games because I'd be so consumed by the tinnitus jet engine sound. And I'd be, like I was saying, I like to compare the sounds being a musician. So I'd be sitting there being like, I never used to hear the fan of my PlayStation over my tinnitus. Now it's the opposite. But once again, I've kind of tried to hear through the tinnitus. And that's a term I've heard used by a few musicians and other people. They hear through the tinnitus. And then you kind of are like, you're kind of like zoning out on the fan sound of the PlayStation, but you're also like hearing the tinnitus. But yeah, it's hard to explain. I wouldn't. Yeah, for me, it's not even background noise. The tinnitus is loud, but it's like I'm just trying to like, hear the noise I don't mind hearing, which is kind of the whir of the fan. When I play the video games, I definitely notice when I play games or listen to music now, the more that I work at this, the more that I find that it does get buried in the sound a little bit more, like it used to when I was younger, before I got really bad tinnitus. So if you're a person who has tinnitus that you can easily not hear if you listen to music or something like that, then your recovery road is easy. You just need a decibel meter on your phone. I use DecX or whatever, and just make sure that your listening volumes are around 70, 75 decibels. If that covers up your tinnitus, you're golden. Wake up in the morning, put on some sounds, put on some music, do your day with music on quietly in the background all day. Have your fan for your bedroom at night and everything like that. That's how I used to live. That's how my life was before when I had mild tinnitus. Obviously, protect your ears and everything when you go out to concerts, and realize that even if you do wear protection, you still do run a risk of your tinnitus going up. In my case, I used to giant hammer drill underneath a slab, and I was like inside a concrete slab, and something must have happened in there. I had some sort of hearing trauma or contributed, and the doctor ENT was like, this probably happened from like holding really heavy vibrating tools like jackhammers and neck trauma. Sure enough, I probably had like 10, 15. I wouldn't even be surprised if I had 20 concussions from like mountain biking and snowboarding and all the extreme sports stuff that I used to also do. So I stopped looking for how it happened, right? I don't know. I took painkillers too because I've got chronic pain from all sorts of motorcycle and mountain bike accidents and falling off a roof and construction. So like there's so many variables to having tinnitus that basically you can just not think about it. Like thinking about how it happened, it ruined my life for a long time. And then for the people who end up with really loud tinnitus, like I do, basically the only chance you have of having a normal life is like, living your life and living with the tinnitus, and it's just there all the time and you don't notice it. So the way that I cope with that mentality is I was working in 2006 building a house, and we had a lot more corded tools back then, and I had a cord was flung over a form and it was stuck behind a 2x4, and instead of going down there and taking the end of the cord out of where it was caught, I just pulled it, kept pulling it, and the cord unhooked, came out, flew through the air, and hit me right in the eye. Hit me right in the right eye, and I had a completely black eye. My whole eye went red. My eye was black. I had to go to the doctor. I fell off the form. I fell too, like at the same time. I went to the doctor, and sure enough, I had eye floaters from it. And so since then, I've had blood clots in my eyes. And whenever I look around, like I'm looking at the white wall of my house right now, and I can see almost like this little, it looks like a little floater. It's floating around. And at first, it like really, really bothered me. Like I would be driving down the Malahat in Victoria, where I lived at the time, and the sun would hit it, and I would see all these squigglies coming down and things floating around. And whenever I'd boot up my computer and the screen would be white, I would see it, and I'd be playing video games, and I would constantly see it, and it like bugged me for a while. And it was I felt a little down about it. And then over time, I would wear sunglasses to minimize it when it would be bright out in the truck or whatever. And then I just kept on playing video games anyways. I was like, well, I'm not going to stop playing video games, even though my eye has been injured. And my vision didn't go down or anything. I just have a floater now, and it's just a distortion. So I got used to that. And so I've started to kind of wonder if tinnitus is like similar to that, right? Like just like the eye floaters. As soon as I talked about it, as soon as I looked over to where I really will for sure see it, and then when I turned over to my computer screen now I can see it. So I do believe it's like the same part of the brain. It's just a little bit harder with tinnitus because it just seems so much more annoying. Like eye floaters, they just don't seem that annoying to me. But tinnitus, for some reason, probably because it's just this nails on the chalkboard sound or whatever, it's annoying. So I guess it's kind of like reshaping your view on it and trying to think of it at first of like a torture sound that enemy would use on you, or if you were a POW or something, to reframe it to be like, like being on a runway with a jet. And then I kind of reframed it to being like a computer monitor in the 90s or television. And then now I've kind of reframed it to like guitar amp noise or something. So like you turn on a guitar amp, tube guitar amp, it basically has tinnitus, it makes all sorts of noises. You got to get a noise gate to quiet it down, but some guys don't, because the noise gate kind of like takes away from their attack on the instrument, so they'll not have a noise gate. And when they turn up the distortion and turn the guitar off or whatever, you just hear and you get used to it. It's part of the band, it's part of the sound of your band. And I personally hated it, so I had a noise gate on my rig, one for rhythm and one for lead, just with enough attack that I played, still play, but when I was really playing guitar, like on that pro level, I would hit the guitar hard. So it didn't matter if I had a noise gate. And then when I turned the guitar down or whatever, it would just be completely silent. So, but still, like, you get used to that. So you get used to it. But I guess the biggest takeaway I have from all of it is that looking back on 2022, I went from being like barely, I couldn't have had a regular job for about 2 years, and then I kind of got a regular job. I did a couple of regular jobs and then they ended. I went to camp. I worked in camp for a bit, and then my partner broke her shoulder actually mountain biking, and she was like laid up for the summer. So I came home to work because, like, in the past, I always worked in town, out of town, in like Fort McMurray throughout my whole 30s. I worked in like all over Alberta. I worked all over BC building oil and dam facilities. I'm like a concrete guy. That's what I built my success in my life off of, was doing those jobs. And so after this happened, I literally was walking dogs and on medical EI in Canada is what it's called. And then I went on regular EI and was trying to find a job that I could do that wasn't noisy or anything. But then as time went on and I got more sound exposure, and I found out that noise wasn't really doing anything to it. And I wasn't exposing myself to any loud noise. I was just always super careful. In the past, say I went to Big Rec a while ago, 3-4 years ago, before this happened, and I would like watch part of the concert with my earplugs, but then I would like really, my favorite song would come on, and I'd take out my earplugs and rush the stage or go closer because I really wanted to hear what they sounded like live off the floor. And, I guess we call that F around and find out, right? And I did, because I'd play a gig when I was younger, because some of this stuff is cumulative, I guess. So when I was younger, I'd play a gig, I'd have the earplugs in, and I'd start to feel really out of touch with the guitar. Like I was executing, but not necessarily hearing the music the way it's supposed to sound. And this is before they had those Eddie-Modic earplugs that you put in and everything sounds the same. This is when you'd put in foamy working earplugs and everything would sound muffled, and you'd crank the guitar amp up louder just to hear it, or the treble or whatever. And then eventually I would be like, okay, I can't hear anything. It's my turn to sing the song. My turn to be in the front. I'm going to get rid of my earplugs for this. And I do like the rest of the show without earplugs. And I have my own way of doing things. Okay, I got up close to the amp. I did a bit of feedback. I got close, but only a couple of times. It was really loud. I felt the snare drum crack on my ears, but it was only a time. I didn't know that one time could be that crack on the snare, or the loud feedback or something that does your hearing in later. So, and then when I was older, in my 30s, and I'd work in those jobs, I'd come back, and for a week I'd work in my recording studio, and that's where the real damage actually happened, I believe, because I was in headphones all the time. And when this happened, I had those Bluetooth headphones that you do construction work with for music, and I was listening to music all the time in there, and not super loud, but pretty loud. And my partner doesn't think there's a correlation with it, but I kind of do. And so I live with some guilt and some frustration with myself for making a wrong decision somewhere along the line. I also overprotected, which is another big no-no with tinnitus. And I didn't even know anything about overprotection. But when you wear your plugs too much, then eventually your brain starts to just think that you're deaf, and it'll create the signal, and it's really hard to unhear it once it creates it. So when this happened, I found earplugs like everywhere. I would put them in as soon as I got out of my truck to work, because I just didn't like loud noises, and I didn't like the sound of grinders and those hammer drills or anything like that. I hated those sounds. So I would always be wearing ear protection on site. And what I've learned is that the best ear protection you can use is passive ear protection that comes on when you need it. So I started getting electric ear protection that is 3M product that only comes on when a sound happens. And that's mostly what I wear now because I have enough hearing loss that when it's noisy, people are talking to me. If I'm wearing earplugs, I can't hear anything. So I wear those passive electronic ones and they like amplify the sound around me. And my hearing therapist in Vancouver, she recommended the earphone over the ear ones for me. But I find that earphones are kind of not fun to wear in the workplace because they're big and I bump them on things. And whenever I bump earphones on things, it makes me feel worried that it's bad for my hearing. And anyways, I got those now, and I got 4 pairs of custom mold different earplugs, and I've got ear muffs and I put them over top of the digital ones and get a little bit more oomph when I'm going to bang on some metal with the sludge. I'm just super careful about everything I do. Before I know, there must have been some holes in what I did. And then another thing that I really thought about over the holidays and talked about with my partner is sugar. Like, we're living in this sugar society. I started watching a couple of documentaries on sugar, and I was watching all sorts of how it works inside your body and the different types of sugar. I knew a little bit, but I don't really know a lot. Like, I'm pretty redneck in that regard, and I'm not really the best eater either. I grew up eating really healthy on a farming town, but as I got older, I kind of ate crappy throughout the years, and my wife and I both don't really. We're not the best influence on each other, We'll go get whatever. So, anyways, we watched a documentary and we decided that we were going to start actively trying to cut down sugar. And I was reading a little bit about tinnitus, and there's been some studies that showed that tinnitus people, a lot of them are diagnosed with this hyperinsulin thing that this guy in this movie was talking about. And basically, your body creates too much insulin, and the doors close to a lot of your cells for the insulin's supposed to open. And all of a sudden, you just got all sorts of triglycerides and really high blood sugar. And it's hard on your heart, and it's hard on your hearing nerves because your hearing nerves really rely on glucose to function in a balanced way. And then when you add too much fructose and high fructose corn syrup and stevia, or not stevia, but the acai berry sweetener, all those things, they like super screw with everything, your nervous system and everything like that. And I studied that a little bit. And so I've been trying that, and I've been eating more of a high-fat diet. And I'm not going to say that the tinnitus is necessarily quieter. I think it was on a couple of days. I really try not to monitor it because that's part of the habituation process. So you try not to spend too much time like checking it out. But when I was doing work with Dr. Ben a little bit there back doing watching a lot of Dr. Ben Thompson videos, and I moderate his page with him, and I'm involved in the tinnitus community through Dr. Ben Thompson. And what I gathered from the tinnitus therapists is that eating differently will not necessarily affect your tinnitus, but what it will affect, and I noticed this after like only a couple of days of just 3 days of like just not eating any added sugar to anything. And I got it out of my coffee. I have a little bit of cream. You can have some sugar, like a little bit of lactose and a little regular sugar, but even the bread that we buy, and we buy good bread or whatever we think is good, and it was like 5 grams of sugar for 2 slices. So if you're supposed to have 36 grams of sugar as a male, and you have 2 slices of bread, you're already at 5. And I was eating like 4 sandwiches for lunch and stuff like that. So even if I ate like 4 sandwiches, I'd be at 20 grams of sugar, added sugar. I'm already only got 15, 16 points left to go. And then I would like go and do something else. Like I would eat a couple granola bars or a thing of yogurt. I was like always hitting way above 40 grams of sugar a day. Like I guarantee you, I have been hitting above 40 grams of sugar a day for like ever, my whole adult life. Maybe even my child, like our parents are like making us fruit punch and stuff, and like giving us granola bars and granola for breakfast. And even this Heritage Grain cereal that I read, it was like 7 grams of sugar per cup. And it's like the organic good stuff that I buy. Rice Krispies had 3 grams of sugar. shredded wheat had 0 grams of sugar. So like if you buy the food that you eat based on sugar, you'll find that even the fanciest organic cereal is packed full of sugar, and the simple shredded wheat or whatever is the healthy choice. So super weird. And I did that for the last week, and I'll tell you this, I didn't get as much anxiety about my tinnitus because I felt like I was taking care of one aspect of my life. So I was getting something that I needed, which is nutrition, and I just haven't been giving that to myself. And so the other night when I was laying in bed, obviously I have a few little techniques I do to go to bed to manage tinnitus. I take 2 melatonins for one thing, and then I lay down in bed and I try to meditate and not think about all my financial stresses and other things that go along with starting a new business, which I'll touch on that in a bit here. And I'll use my tinnitus management techniques to go to sleep. But I was noticing the other night, I hadn't eaten as much during the day, but when I was laying in bed, I felt really like content and like I'd been well fed. And I totally had made hamburgers without any barbecue sauce, with cheese on them. And then I roasted up a whole bunch of red peppers and carrots and broccoli and stuff in a pan in the oven. And I had like these burger bowls that I made that are just hamburgers with a bunch of peppers and stuff, just a meat and vegetable thing. And I felt so good after, like I was like, oh, I feel awesome. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna go easy on the sugar. And then, and then I was like, I wonder how much alcohol has in it. And I had been having a few drinks after Christmas or whatever. And sure enough, the one night I was chatting with my buddy, I had a strongbow, and it was like my tinnitus was just raging. So I definitely have like made this connection between my sugar levels, stress levels, and like tinnitus and busyness factor. So like when I first got it, I like couldn't do anything. I would just sit in the house. I would like try to sleep, barely get any sleep, get up, get myself up on a couple hours sleep, go around my house, make some food. And that went on for like a couple of months. And then I started getting into building model cars. That was like on month 3 or something, 4. And I started like walking to the hobby store to get like paint for my model car and stuff like that. And it sounds pretty sad, but it was a meditative thing that I could do while I was like first experiencing the horrible first few months, or even worse, right? And I'm not going to say in some ways it gets better, in other ways it doesn't. Like I still do dwell on like, you know, I just wish it would go away sometimes, right? I'm like, oh, when's this going to go away? So in some ways later down the road it can be bad too, because you're just like, isn't this supposed to have gone away by now? But it's definitely not as horrifying. It's more just like annoying. Like you don't have to like make friends with your tinnitus 100. Your tinnitus is like an annoying roommate that you like put up with because that's what it's going to take for you to live in that house. It's like how you have to look at it. It's like I could rent this 1-bedroom apartment by myself for $1,300 a month, or I can share this nice house with a roommate for $1,100 a month or $1,000 a month. But the problem is that he's fucking annoying. He doesn't do any dishes. He like uses your bath towel and fucking always parks in your parking spot. And at first you're just like, oh my fucking God, this guy. And then after like a year of it, you're just like, oh, he always does his dishes after a couple of days. You're just like, whatever, man. I'm over here doing my thing. You know, can you do your dishes? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure, dude. Yeah, no problem. And you're like, okay, thanks, man. And can you also move your truck out of my parking spot? Oh, yeah, I had to load something. And you're like, yeah, okay, no problem. And then you sit there and tell yourself, yeah, well, I can be homeless if I don't live with this guy. So that's basically tinnitus to me. So moving forward, I guess the thing that I really wanted to touch on is that I've restarted my own business and building the playgrounds. and doing like jobs out of town and stuff. And I saw quite a bit of growth in that. Like as soon as I started doing these playgrounds, I realized I was going to need a truck and trailer set up for sure to do it. And I already had the trailer, and I had a really nice truck. I am an oil field guy after all, but it was a half ton. So I went into a 1 ton. I sold my half ton to my wife. I went and bought a 1 ton. I went through absolute hell with that truck. There was a bunch of stuff wrong with it. It was certified nearly new by Dodge. Went through that. Dodge paid for everything in the end. Came out a win, big positive. I did a really, really hard job in Victoria, like a really crappy playground. And I got a little bit behind. My business partner ended up being hurt and stuff like that. And I ended up not doing as great as I thought. And suffered a little bit of a loss. And yeah, I'm going through like regular business stuff, like starting a business, getting paid, waiting to get paid, getting a new truck, getting trucks, getting new tools, learning how to do the work. And that really is what's keeping me sane right now, because, and honestly, after 3 weeks of being off, started to feel a little down. Like I just want to get going again and get paid and get working again. So for me, work is like the best thing. I miss being away from my dog and stuff, but it's like it's the best thing. So yeah, I feel kind of good about building the playgrounds. I still haven't totally returned to music. I find music a bit frustrating, and that's the truth of where I'm at right now. I get frustrated with music. It doesn't always sound right. I did shred it out on guitar the other night, and Sarah's in the other room. She's like, "Oh my God, you sound awesome!" And I'm just like, I know it's hard to get used to hearing the tinnitus mixed in with the guitar tone, and I'm trying to. It distracts me a little bit, and I'll like make the odd mistake because I'm like changing focus, and nothing sounds the same. And definitely turning up a guitar amp and thudding out a few awesome power chords or something and feeling it in your chest. I can't really even do that, so I don't even know if I could drown out my tinnitus with the guitar now, because I haven't really tried. So, and I'm not going to try because I really don't want to aggravate it anymore. So, yeah, hard for me to get back into recording. I don't feel like I really have the stamina for listening to things for a long time. But I might find some ways, and I don't use headphones. And that's a thing that I think a lot of people with tinnitus should really hear and stick with, is that headphones are just so bad for your ears. And I liked headphones. I'd use them for everything. I'd have them on for gaming. I think gaming might have done it to me. I was like playing a lot of Call of Duty when this happened. Just got my PS4. I was like renovating my house. I got a couple of weekends to myself, and I was just blasting out 8-hour sessions of Call of Duty. And I don't know how loud it was. So I play Call of Duty still now. And I hear everything pretty good. I just hear ringing at the same time. But I always play it on my desktop speakers. And I set up my phone with my decibel meter, and I make sure that if there's a bunch of kill streaks coming in with jets flying around overhead, that it doesn't do anything. Because I remember one time I was gaming and the kill streaks were coming in, and I felt like it was just rattling my hearing. And it wasn't long after that I got tinnitus really bad, and I didn't think about it at the time because I just wanted to game quietly and not upset anybody around me. But now I play those games at about 60 decibels. I play them pretty quiet because there is peaks in those games that can jump out at you that are 90 decibels, even when you're playing most of the game at 65 decibels. So what a lot of us used to do is crank up the volume so we can hear people's footsteps, and then we follow the sound and can kill the opponent player. And I would highly not recommend doing that. I did that for years. My hearing sucks now. So I put it on midnight mode, and I put it on like 2 little stereo monitors on my desk. And yeah, I've been playing Far Cry. If you guys watch my streams, I've been playing a regular, open world game. It's kind of fun. And I find playing that open world game really helps me with my tinnitus to a point, till I get like kind of sick of playing the repetitious aspect of the game. But I really find that solving the riddles and stuff in the video game super helps me. So when I first started gaming again, when I got tinnitus, I played XCOM because XCOM, it didn't have too much going on with sound, and it was something that I could just kind of do when I was tired, play the turn-based game. It took me probably a good solid 6 or 8 months before I could start playing shoot 'em ups again. But as soon as I could play Call of Duty again, when I was off work because of tinnitus, I was playing Call of Duty like back to 4 or 5, 6 hours a day. And there's this guy named Vikram or something on YouTube, and he's an ENT that got tinnitus. I think he's an ENT, and that's exactly how he said he beat tinnitus. Was he played high-paced, multiplayer, first-person shooter games, and it really helped him. He started like me with like listening to like boring documentaries and stuff like that, but then he went into doing the high-paced action shooter games. So I really feel that like video games have been like a really important aspect of me recovering from tinnitus because it gives me less time to sit and just ruminate on the tinnitus. And it gives my brain something else to do. And so as soon as I could, I beat Uncharted, I beat The Last of Us 2, I played GTA 5 online a lot when I first got tinnitus. I got back into Call of Duty, and then I just joined PlayStation Extra and again now, and I'm playing Far Cry 5. I'm going to play Ghost of Tsushima. And it actually feels good to wake up in the morning on my holiday time because I'm kind of like doing stuff like that and being like, I am super stoked to play this game today. You know, I'm going to walk my dog and then I'm going to play this game. And I know for me, that was something that I really lost in my tinnitus journey. I really lost that ability to be like, oh, this song is so good, you know, or, oh, I can't wait to get up and play that video game again. Because as soon as I would start actually hearing the song, I would be like, oh my God, the ringing's taking over. As soon as I would start to play my game, I would just be like, all I can hear is ringing. So I would totally get derailed from it in the past, kind of take over my life. And now I'm kind of allowing myself. And then, you know what? I still am like, oh, I can't wait to play this game today. And then I'm like, ugh, I got to listen to it with tinnitus. Wouldn't it be nice if I didn't have to listen to this game with tinnitus? Aren't people so lucky to have good hearing where they just hear the game? And I get into that, but I have to kind of consciously go, yeah, well, that's not what's happening for me. I am somebody who has ringing all the time. You could not tell if you just seen me on the street or talked to me in public or I came to do a carpentry job for you. You would have no idea that I have tinnitus until I told you. And then you'd be like, oh, me too. And then it's like, yeah, like you're not suffering alone with it, right? But it sure feels like it. So over time, I think basically what I'm doing is I'm just doing the stuff that I do. And I'm going to Vancouver to build a playground. I want to buy a welder, get into welding. And that's another thing that I really has found help me is that when you try to do the same thing over and over and over again with it, it really hasn't helped me. So like for me, music is a huge loss. It's a huge grievance that I have from having tinnitus. I constantly still feel grief that I probably won't be a professional musician now. I already knew I probably wouldn't be one because I'm like in my 40s. But anybody who's ever been into music or sports or drives a race car or whatever it is that you do, there's always that little thing in the back of your mind that's like, maybe I might make it big at this, or maybe I'll make a living off of this. Let's say that maybe this could be my living, you know. But then say you went blind and you're a race car driver, that's not going to be your living necessarily, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do things. So maybe for me, I don't necessarily say I'm giving up on music, but I've found that like working on radio controlled cars and going out and driving them is something that I can do. It's something that I can achieve. I can buy the car with money I made at work or whatever, credit card. I can get the car there. I can drive the car until it breaks and then I can tear it apart. And so, like I said, the other night I was having a relapse of tinnitus anxiety on the couch and I was watching TV and I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was really bugging me. And I just went into the garage and I started ripping apart some differentials on my one truck in there. And I had the garage door open and I could really like hear the sounds of the neighborhood around me. And I was like, it felt like the tinnitus went down. I just kind of got into the zone of what I'm doing. And then I started getting grumpy about whatever I was doing on the car. And I was like, that's good. That's good. I'm diverting my grumpy towards my tinnitus into being grumpy towards this gasket that's not working and just my normal, this thing's pissing me off. Kind of, I got to get it back together. I want to play with it. And then in the end, I get to play with it. And so it's the same with my work. I've totally learned how to build these playgrounds, and I'm gonna go get a welder, and I want to get a little mini excavator. I just want to keep learning skills that are things that I can do that aren't necessarily related to fine hearing and being a recording engineer and being a musician, all the other things that I basically based my personality off of, and then sort of accepting that those things might not necessarily be my focus anymore, but also being kind of excited because I've always wanted to get into fabrication, have a little gas-powered arc welder. I've always really liked working with tools and working with my hands. I'm still really physically capable. 230-pound dude, big, strong. My health is not bad. So going down the list of things that I do have going on for me has really helped me, and I suggest everybody do the same. Another thing that's helped me in the last little while is there's this guy out there. His name's Jordan Peterson. He's a clinical psychologist, and that dude has some pretty awesome motivational stuff that he talks about, and a lot of it is about finding out what you want, finding out what you want to do, finding out what to aim at, finding out how to find a goal, what you want out of life, those kind of questions, hard questions. And a lot of people who go through the tinnitus journey and come out at the other end, some of them even say that it was one of the best things that happened to them because they learned how to cope with life in a way that they had never done before. So, I've made a lot of strides since I got tinnitus. I honestly thought that I never would. I thought I never would pull out of it. I still yearn for the day where I just don't think about it anymore, because I do still think about it quite a bit, and I notice it quite a lot, and it's always there. But that being said, today when I went on my dog walk, I found myself grabbing my little speaker. I made sure I only got a speaker that can go to 80 decibels, by the way, because those little Bluetooth speakers can hurt your ears too, and I didn't know that. I used to run around with the one I had before, just cranked. Anyway, I had my Bluetooth speaker in my pocket. I was listening to a little music, and I went for my dog walk. And when I go into the forest with my dog, I hear quite a bit of tinnitus still, but I find that I'm at peace. I'm at peace in the woods. I'm walking with my dog. I'm walking around. And, and then another thing that I really like to do that really helps me cope with tinnitus is I like to make food, and touches back on what I was talking about with sugar and diet and stuff. I definitely kind of forgot that I have quite a bit of culinary talent, and I was so absorbed with eating crappy food, and I work on the road and I'm often eating junk. And I started making some real healthy meals and stuff again, and grilling some meat. And I really find that frying up bacon and stuff masks my tinnitus sound. So frying up meat, frying up beef really masks my tinnitus sound. So when I'm in the kitchen, I'm frying up meat, I feel like, I'm a little bit at peace. And then my wife is all stoked because she's sort of okay at cooking, but she's not on that level. And so for her, it's like going to a restaurant. She's just like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, I can cook better than the restaurant. So there's a few skills that I hadn't been really caring about that suddenly became my survival skills. The things I thought were my survival skills, like playing guitar, being in a band, and recording a song, I thought those were my survival skills. But what they really are is cooking, knowing how to meditate. I got diagnosed with sleep apnea and got a CPAP machine too, so that was a big change. Trust me, when I first got the CPAP machine, and I got Darth Vader stuff and tubes running off me, and my ears are ringing, and I hear the machine. Oh, I was in tears at first, and then a year later, I'm like, this is awesome. I love this thing. I get good sleeps every time I lie down now. The only time I get a bad sleep is when I'm stressed out about work or something, like a normal person. I don't usually lay there thinking about tinnitus all night like I used to. I do have the ability to shut it off, and right before I fall asleep, it'll just like go away, and I'll have like 1 minute of pure tinnitus free, and then I'll either wake up and be like, "Oh my god, that was cool," or I'll fall asleep and be like, "Hmm." So that's my take on it. So my advice for anybody who's watching, that my takeaway from it all is that, I don't know, if I can do it, you can do it. My tinnitus is super shitty, super loud. I can hear it all the time. I'm really sensitive to those type of things. It really wrecked my life, and I'm seeming to kind of keep going and pull out of it. And I just have to make sure that when I'm sitting on the couch and I go, honey, what if my tinnitus gets even worse and worse? And she's like, well, you've had it since you were like 12 years old, and it already has gotten worse. So I'm like, yeah, I knew the answer to that question. So yeah. Anyways, I don't have much more to say. I just want you guys to buy that model car and build it, or do that little hobby that you like, or turn on your PlayStation, start doing a little bit of gaming. Just like try to do one thing today to get back to life. Try to do one thing, little thing, whatever it is. If it's going for a walk, doing a little stretching, making yourself some eggs on toast. It can be, fry up an egg, eat it, watch a little comedy on YouTube. Like, I find listening to talking on YouTube really soothes me, because I don't have to like hear the music and try to have the music and the tinnitus coexist. I find listening to like Bill Burr or something, or whatever I like to listen to, a lot more soothing to me. A Jordan Peterson speech I find soothing to me. So if you can find someone that you can listen to on YouTube, put that on and do some dishes and put around in the kitchen, you can like call that a win for the day if you're in that place. If you're a little bit beyond that place where you're just like, I'm not totally devastated by this right now, but I'm also like uncomfortable in my own body sometimes and wish I could escape my own body. And that's definitely something I'm sure a lot of people with tinnitus can relate to, is you're just like, how do I escape this? I just wanted to stop. That's when it's time to go into that garage and work on that RC car, or that's when it's time to do that poster board, dream board thing that you've been thinking about doing, or that's when it's time to turn on the Joe Rogan podcast and listen to just something so weird that it doesn't even mean you have to agree with it or not. You can just listen to it and go, oh wow, that's interesting. Like, I really enjoyed the Bill Burr where he's talking to Paul Stamets about psilocybin, and they're just talking about all the effects of microdosing lion's mane and psilocybin. He actually talks about an old guy who took psilocybin and his hearing came back. So anyways, there's some funny, interesting Joe Rogans and stuff out there. I listened to music right off the get-go with tinnitus. Like, I had Larkin Poe, this girl blues band, playing all the time quietly on my phone. And I guess what I read on a lot of the forums is playing music with tinnitus is kind of like another form of ear training. Like, when you do music, you like learn how to hear all the different tones and pitches and intervals and chords and stuff. Well, this is just another version of that. It's just a little bit more difficult of a technique. So what I've stuck with is just continuing to do it. And even like before I had tinnitus, there's just some days that I just don't feel like listening to a lot of music. We all have those days. And some people don't really even like music. So for someone who doesn't really into music, tinnitus might not be so devastating. But for a lot of us that love music, it's like our thing. We like love music. It can be pretty devastating. So sometimes it's like good to just have it on in the background, just something there. And then once again, you give gratitude. I can hear this music I have ringing, but I can still hear all the guitar tones. I can still hear everything about it. I can still hear all the words. My hearing's still good, if it is. If not, then you should look into getting hearing aids and then put them in and then go, yeah, I can hear some aspect of this. I've got a buddy who had a stroke. He's deaf in one ear now. He can't hear that good. It's a wall of noise to him. So, and then Paul Gilbert of Racer X, Mr. Big, he said the same thing. He said the tinnitus doesn't really bother him. It's his inability to be able to hear speech and to go to an event like NAM or whatever and talk to people. He hasn't been able to do it. And so he'll find himself hiding behind the computer a lot more, on the forums or emailing with people instead of chatting on the phone. And what happens is you start to become sort of socially non-stimulated because you can't. It can be hard for me to go to a restaurant too. I can't hear what anybody's saying, but I have hearing aids. So when I know I'm going to be going into that not high noise, but lots of different crosstalk and stuff, I definitely have my hearing aids ready to go. And I bring them into the restaurant and I'm wearing them and it's amazing. I can hear in the sound. But if I don't have my hearing aids in, which is a lot of the time, and there's like a motor or something beside me, I'm like lost. So I can't hear. I'm sitting there going, what? Yeah. Anyways, I don't have a ton of advice. I just try to get out there and talk about my experience so that other people can relate to it. You can write in the comments, and love how everybody's been writing all their stories to me. I really like how people have been like reaching out and coming and joining the Pure Tinnitus Facebook group out there. I've added a few people. I've really enjoyed counseling. One fella from England who FaceTimed with me a little while ago. I gave him like a counseling session for it. And, he still suffers. He's in the initial part of it, but I felt like there was some impact there and kind of building of the community. So, it's definitely a tough go. And I don't know if it really gets a lot easier, but even a little bit easier is a lot with this, I would say. So, if you can find a couple little things to do, to just is my only advice. Mostly I just like to show that 3 years or 2.5 years ago or whatever it was, I was like, thought my life was over. Like I just thought it was going to be over. And then now I'm like going into my third year with it, which I will admit is quite terrifying to hit year 3 and still have the tinnitus being loud and still sort of struggling with it a little bit of the time is frustrating. But like I said, the way I see it is when I have those times where I'm like, oh, this is so annoying. How am I going to live with this? What if it gets louder? All those things. I like start thinking back, or I'll talk to Sarah. I'll be like, I have some good days, right? And she's like, you've been having a lot of good days. Like you've been going like a week without talking about tinnitus. And I'll be like, yeah, that's true. I've been thinking about it a little bit, but I haven't been like so annoyed by it that I have to talk about it all the time, because that can be another problem that I've felt I've done a lot, is that I'm so consumed with the tinnitus. It's like all I ever talk about to my wife. Like I gotta tell her every time a new tone comes in for a second, every spike, everything. I still do tell her quite a lot, but it's exhausting for her. And there came a point where she's like, I can't actually hear everything about your tinnitus. And so what I learned through my hearing therapy is you actually have to make time for the tinnitus for you guys to talk about it. Otherwise, you'll just dominate every conversation that you ever have with your wife or whatever, and then they can't stand it. It's like just so annoying because they don't necessarily always understand. So I found that it was hard love, and I did start to back off with the talking about it constantly. And now I find that when I get up and it seems quiet, I feel like I can get through the day. The best thing I can do for myself is to not start just like talking or thinking about it. And I'm trying to get there. It's not easy. It's a daily struggle. And I really hope it turns into like less of a struggle. I think it is. It definitely doesn't make me as sad anymore. So I think it gets better. So that's my takeaway from it. So I know I hope you enjoyed my last rant or whatever, and this ramble. Just yeah, I love to see your comments, and if you've made it this far, tell me your story. Rate me a comment. You know, and come join up Pure Tinnitus if you feel like it, or private message me on Facebook. And if you really need help and you're really in crisis, reach out to me. You're not alone. It's really easy to feel alone with this. Really easy to go outside and walk around and think, oh my God, these people must not be experiencing this. This is just me. And then what happens is you start finding out that like a whole pile of people have this and they're doing all right. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe I'll be okay too. So at the end of the day, probably end up being okay. Okay, talk to you. Bye.